All right, so today on the featured segment, I'm going to be going over the pros and cons of the 29-inch wheel mountain bike. It's otherwise known as the 29er, and it's a nice mountain bike style, and it's something that I, in the last couple years, switched over to, and I really enjoy it. You know, I think it's a great way to go. Compared to the traditional 26-inch mountain bike tire or mountain bike wheel. The 26-inch wheel was for a long time the traditional mountain bike size wheel, because the mountain bike came from sort of these beach cruisers that the guys in California they would take these beach cruisers and turn them into these bikes that could be ridden off-road, and when they were doing it, they were riding downhill mainly, so they needed to be pretty bomber and tough. So they sort of evolved from that beach cruiser size wheel of the 26-inch wheel, and just a couple years ago, or a few years ago, people started playing around with these 29-inch wheels. And actually, I think people have been playing around with them for a bit longer than that, but it hasn't been until a couple years ago that this thing has sort of hit more of the mainstream in mountain biking. And, you know, it's a really nice system, and it kind of gives you a little more of a cushy ride. And I'll get into the pros of these things here. But overall, from my experience, I think the 29-inch wheel is a great way to go. But there are some limitations, and I'll get into those as well. But overall, these larger wheels have a tendency to roll over obstacles a little bit easier, and they also carry a certain amount of momentum, so you can kind of keep your speed up on trails. And the combination of being able to roll over obstacles a little easier, and that momentum, it just helps kind of smooth out the ride overall. And it's sort of a hard thing to describe, just talking about it. But if you look at sort of the physics behind it, you'll see that if you were to hit let's say like a 6-inch rock ledge or something on the trail, or a large root or something, the 26-inch wheel will sort of, the overall circumference of that wheel will have a little more trouble actually rolling over that obstacle in comparison to the 29-inch wheel. So there's just certain physics behind it that helps propel you down the trail in a smoother fashion. So like I said, I'm having trouble really describing it. Something that when you actually try the bike out, you'll notice that it has that feeling. So it can basically take a hardtail mountain bike, or a rigid frame mountain bike, and give it a little more of a suspension feel to it. And again, it's kind of hard to really put into words and help visualize, but it gives it a cushier ride in many ways. And I've heard that from multiple riders that they say, I was thinking about getting a full suspension mountain bike, traditional 26-inch wheel mountain bike. And then they rode a 29-inch wheel mountain bike with a front suspension fork, and the rigid frame, and they're perfectly happy with it. And so I think that it can give you a little closer feel to a full suspension traditional 26-inch mountain bike. But it's not going to handle big impacts and big hits like a full suspension bike will. It gets closer to that feel than a 26-inch rigid mountain bike. The other thing that's really cool about the 29er is that it corners really well. If you've ridden a road bike much, you'll know that kind of when you lean the bike over into a corner, to me it just feels like it's really kind of digging in and cutting into the corner. And with the 29-inch wheel mountain bike, it gives me a similar feeling. There's a certain, you can kind of lean the bike over, and it doesn't feel like it's going to cut loose as easily as a 26-inch mountain bike. And part of that has to do with the geometry. Things are just a little bit longer on a 29-inch wheel mountain bike, so it provides a little more stability in that way. And then you also actually get a little more actual tire patch. The amount of tire that's contacting the ground, you get a little more of that contact, and it just helps with the traction. And that also applies for climbing or descending. You're just going to get a little more traction, even if you're not cornering and you're just going straight up a climb. You're going to get a little more traction based on that increased tire contact on the ground. So overall, I think there's just a lot of good reasons to go to the 29-inch wheel on a mountain bike, and just overall, it kind of has a little bit of a livelier feel to me. But then we'll get into the sort of cons and maybe the reasons against a 29-inch wheel mountain bike. The one that I hear a lot is sort of the slow cornering in tight single track. And this was more just the ability to maneuver around obstacles really quickly. Like, if you're riding, at least from my experience on the East Coast, there's generally pretty tight single track that you need to be able to maneuver quickly around obstacles or through routes and things. And the 26-inch wheel is just, it's going to be faster. They've made a lot of improvements to the 29-inch wheel mountain bikes by playing with the geometry and kind of getting things dialed in that way. But, I don't know if it's ever going to really get to the point where it's as quick and agile as a 26-inch wheel mountain bike in those really tight conditions. But on the flip side to that, one thing that I know is that with the 29-inch wheel, you can almost pick new lines in that you can, focus on lines that you normally wouldn't go on your 26-inch wheel mountain bike.